Okay, we are live here at the Fife Milton Edgewood Chamber of Commerce, and my name's Lora Butterfield. I'm the president and CEO of the Chamber, and I am joined by Shelly Schlumpf, who is running for Port of Tacoma, the commissioner race. So we're excited to have Shelly here. Welcome, Shelly.
Thank you.
And Shelly, to start us out, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running?
All right. So again, my name is Shelly Schlumpf, and I'm running for position 5 as a commissioner for the Port of Tacoma. And I'm running because I have a lot of experience in working with the port, and I value the port and all of the jobs that it brings to our region. So a little bit about myself and my background. I was born and raised here in Pierce County. I'm actually 4th generation from a small town called Ording. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. And I married the son of a Swiss dairy farmer. We grew up together out there, and we raised our children in the Puyallup School District, and I have 2 grandchildren right now in the Bethel School District. My background is currently I am a consultant for private and public entities. The name of my company is Main Street Elements. Prior to that, I was a president and CEO of the Puyallup Sumner Chamber of Commerce for about 8 years. In doing that, I became highly involved. When I took that position, the number one concern with our members, over 400 of them, was transportation. So I worked the first 6 years of my job there, working heavily on getting the 2016 transportation package passed. And then I became a member of the steering committee for the Puget Sound Gateway, and ensuring that the scope of work that was included in that package was maintained through the communities that we represented of Puyallup, Sumner, and South Hill. And after that, I became involved on the funding process, and we did a lot of grassroots efforts for getting federal funding for the transportation project. Doing like letter writing, over 100 and some letters from our chamber members, and so I was highly involved in transportation. And then workforce development too. The last 18 months that I was at the chamber, those questions came in about where do we find the employees that we need. That was a critical need. So before I was the president and CEO of a chamber of commerce, I was the executive director for a downtown association, for the Sumner Downtown Association, and I'm a certified Main Street manager through the National Trust for Historic Preservations. I dig old buildings, so I like keeping those.
So say that again. You're what?
I'm a certified Main Street manager through the National Trust for Historic Preservation. It's a national program through Washington, D.C., so I did my training back there, which is very interesting. And then my first career was as a paralegal for almost 30 years in Sumner, and my husband and I also had a construction company for over 20 years, so I'm familiar with construction and the challenges, and that's been very beneficial in my position representing businesses and permitting and things. So running for office, the 3 big reasons: I want to protect the port and the jobs that the port creates, the family wage jobs. Those are critical for Pierce County. I want to protect the infrastructure. The traffic congestion in Pierce County is daunting every day. I get a lot of people that complain about 2 to 4 hour commutes every day, and that's just not good for quality of life. So we want to address that congestion and then open up our freight corridors that also support those jobs into the port. My goal in life is, at some point, I want to be able to drive from Puyallup to the port on 167. I want it to be finished, so that's a goal. And then my third reason for running for office is innovation. We want to use the newest sciences and technologies to address our environment, our air and water and marine life, and even more important, if you will, the health and safety of the workers at the port. So those are the 3 reasons that I'm running.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I live in Sumner, so I have heard of Ording.
Go Cardinals.
I actually love Ording. I used to go run on the trail over there a lot, and
we have to do something about that road too. 162. Okay.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So you kind of shared with us a lot of the things that you've done. How about any other areas of public service? Have you? Are there other areas that you have?
So I come from a family of volunteers, so I've done a lot of volunteering through different organizations, but maybe most relevant to this I'm currently serve as the president-elect for the Puyallup Historical Society. And I've served on 3 different lodging tax advisory committees. Let's see, the Pierce County LTAC committee, Puyallups, and Sumner's. And the biggest probably project that I worked on in all of the years that I've served on those was with the U.S. Open when we had that out here at Chambers Bay. So we had, a lot of people that came from all over the world. It was wonderful, but I think the biggest reason that I'm involved and have that kind of background with tourism is because in Puyallup we have this little thing called the Washington State Fair. So 2.5 million people a year come through that city, and so we want to capture as much of that economic impact as we can.
Yeah, that little thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the strengths that you see at the Port of Tacoma right now?
So obviously, I think the Seaport Alliance, that that alliance between the Port of Tacoma and the Port of Seattle was very strategic in the sense that instead of a race to the bottom and competing against each other for rates and things like that, we come together and are stronger, I think. And now we can address things like Prince Rupert, Canada, maybe the Panama Canal, or some of the other ports that might take away business from us. So, and we want to maintain those jobs. Number one thing, we want to protect the port and protect the family wage jobs that it provides here regionally.
Absolutely, thank you. How about areas of improvement? Are there some opportunity areas that you see that you'd like to focus on, and maybe, along with that, what do you think is the biggest issue, and what would your plan be for dealing with that?
So areas of improvement, and this is for a lot of organizations, not just the port, but I think better communication. And it's a little bit, I hear it over and over again as I'm out working with or talking to businesses. There is a sense that we wish that we knew more ahead of time with what's going on with the port. And most people are curious about it anyway. They know that those big ships are coming in and out, and they're curious about how it operates. From a chamber perspective, I don't know about you, but I probably interacted with the port 4 or 5 times a month in dealing with whether it be government affairs or whether I was at meetings and they were being represented there. But it's still, I still think that maybe the port talks port and not communities. I think there's an opportunity here for, and I would like to see that as a commissioner, to be more engaged with the communities in a way that they can understand what the port what they're doing and how those jobs are created, because I don't know that they fully understand how the port operates. And so I think there's room for improvement there. And I also think for the stakeholders, I think better relationships, strengthening relationships, and the trust in those relationships. I think those are 2 things that could help the port as we look into the future. You want to have a regional support for the Port of Tacoma, not just the port going out and saying this is a great idea what we're doing and this is how we're going to provide those family wage jobs. So I think there's definitely room in those 2 areas.
Okay, that sounds good. So what would be your top agenda objective as a port commissioner?
I think we need to, it's jobs. Family wage jobs is number 1 for me. I think people take the port for granted, like it's always going to be here. It's been here for so long that I think they think it will always be here no matter what. We can make these changes or add in these regulations or whatever it might be, and no matter what, the port's going to be here. And I don't know if it's just that I'm getting older or what, but I've seen industries that are no longer here based on my time in either whether I'm with the Chamber of Commerce or whether just growing up here in Pierce County. For example, I mentioned initially that I married into a Swiss dairy family, and there are no more dairy farms out in Nording. That wasn't a priority for that community, and so they're gone. And I can name them all by name, and they're just no longer there anymore. The bulb industry that perhaps people have heard of, the Daffodil Festival, there's one man standing, and that's Roger Knutson. He's the only, and he grows them basically for the festival and not beyond that. The industry is not here anymore. And so I don't want that to happen to the port. With 28,000 direct and indirect jobs being created by the port, and those are family wage jobs. Those are jobs that have a higher salary, have benefits. That's how you can raise your family and provide a quality of life that you want. We have to value the port, and that's why I think it's important to have good relationships and communication. And by protecting the port, that's how we'll sustain and grow, because I think there's great opportunity down there to grow the family wage jobs that we currently have.
All right. Let's talk about the sub-area plan.
Oh, let's.
So what would your priority outcomes be for the Tide Flats? So this is the Tacoma Tide Flats sub-area plan. The city of Tacoma has put together a plan and has got several partners as part of this plan. They've got the tribe, I believe the city of Fife, Pierce County,
City of Tacoma.
City of Tacoma. Not sure. I think that there's 5 organizations that are part of it, or 5 different
governing agencies.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard too.
Yeah. Oh, and the port.
Yep.
Yeah. So what would your priority outcomes be for the sub-area plan?
So again, protect the port, protect those jobs. We have to protect the businesses that are operating down in the Tide Flats. So if we talk about gentrification of the Tide Flats, just based on what I've seen where I grew up, it doesn't mix. So I'm highly concerned about that. I do like, some of the impacts that we've had with environmental regulations. I think we've improved the environment that we have down there, which, ultimately that improves the health and safety for the people that work in the port. But at the end of the day, we have to protect the zoning in order to make sure that those businesses can thrive and grow into the future as they need to. Someone made the comment to me, let's just, as I was going around talking to people, don't worry about it, Shelly. We're just going to keep it the way it is. We're going to put a lid on it and no more, what's there is there, and then that's it. And based on my knowledge and probably yours in working with businesses, that's great until you either need to maybe remodel your building to put in new equipment that keeps up with today's technologies, or if you need to expand because you're growing your business. As soon as you put in a permit to do any of that, that's when you bump up against those regulations. You might be grandfathered in, but once you go to make any changes, that's when it can impact a business. And if it's not easy for that business to grow or maintain or keep up with the technologies and science of today, what happens is they move on and they don't stay at the port, and those jobs go with them. So again, number one priority, protect the port and protect those family wage jobs that we have there, and also provide the opportunities to grow those family wage jobs.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a moment ago that there has been a lot done to improve the environment there. What specifically do you know that has been done at the port? I know this wasn't on the question, so I just sorry.
We're winging it, Sean.
Winging it a little bit here, but
so there's a lot of concern about the LNG plant. I support that. A lot of that comes from I tell people I'm the daughter of a Teamster, the wife of a carpenter, and my son-in-law is an HVAC journeyman. So I look at the diesel trucks that are down there. I grew up around those. My dad. I've been around diesel trucks pretty much my whole life. And when they start those engines, I think about the ships that we have coming in with that diesel emission, and I know the regulations coming in at the end of the year for lowering the sulfur emissions as of January 1, 2020. I think that that's the best science that we have available today. If you asked me in 10 or 15 or maybe 20 years, would it still be LNG? I don't know. Maybe it's electrification. Maybe it's solar, batteries. I'm listening now to other projects where that's coming online. But I think the diesel that we have, the particulates that are coming out of those ships right now, I do not think that is healthy for our environment. I do not think that is healthy for our port workers. And so I support where they're going, with that right now, because I think it's the best science that we have available.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. So how do you see the port interfacing, and you talked about this a few minutes ago a little bit, but how do you see it interfacing with the community in general, and how do you think that can be improved?
So I think that they are. Most people that I talk to, even in the general public. So first off, let me say this. I kind of get a laugh every time I go out and talk. When you get your ballot in the mail and you get to the port commissioners or judges, people go, okay. So it's like they really don't understand it unless you're working in that industry. It's like, I don't know, and so I'm concerned about voting for that person. And so to me, that tells me that there's a communication gap or a translation thing between the communities and what the port is actually doing. And so I would like to see a better communication in a language that relates to the various communities. Ording might not have this, I mean, their needs right now are how do we deal with 162? We're building the houses that we need out there, but how do we get to them? It's an hour-long drive, and when I was growing up, unless you were behind Mr. Hamill and his pickup, you could get there in 15 minutes. And so, you know, I look at that and I think, okay, so Ording has this particular issue. I think Fife, you would say that has a different personality, and they have different community issues. I think it's critical in the South Sound region that the port understand how what the community needs are, and to speak to those needs that they have in relationship to the port. So they can say, the port's doing this, we think this might help you with your issue, or does this, even you ask the question, does this help you with your issues? I think more communication like that. I mean, if you look around Pierce County, it's a big county, big county. And so Gig Harbor, it's different than Tacoma. You know, Yelm or Eatonville, you know, the cruisers out there, that's totally different. So I think there is room for the port to better engage with our South Sound communities. And if we begin to understand in our communities how important, and we begin to value the port, then I think we start to feel the same kind of team responsibility, if you will, for maintaining the viability of the port and growing those jobs. It becomes our port, not just the port.
Yeah, I agree. You know, when I was at the Bonnie Lake Chamber, I can't tell you how many times we talked about 167 and the importance of the port and the jobs that the port that are here because of the port. And so many people had no idea and said they didn't think that it affected them. So, which I think is interesting.
Well, again, if you don't know,
it's communication. Yeah, a lot of it's communication. So.
Okay, so you're opening the door for me to go into stats. There's a couple of
Okay,
stats I'd love to
it.
repeat. So my understanding is that the Port of Tacoma is responsible for about 28,000 direct and indirect jobs. Overall, I think with the Seaport Alliance, it's so like 58,000. But let's just say there's 28,000 direct and indirect from the Port of Tacoma. 14,000 of those jobs are located in the north end of Sumner. Okay, so half of those are in Sumner, and
Wow.
6,000 to 7,000 truck trips a day are occurring coming out of that particular area. So, and then on top of that, when I do meetings, I'm on the YMCA Advisory Council in Sumner, and the mayor Neil Johnson is on the board there as well, and he was saying that their number one employment center is that north end of Sumner. That's where most of the traffic is
Really,
coming
for
down the
Bonnie
hill
Lake?
from Bonnie Lake.
Wow.
Yeah. So critical.
Wow, yeah,
Yep.
very critical. Okay, so let's see. How can we be leveraging the work on economic development outside of the port to attract and retain businesses and family wage jobs in the South Sound?
So I think that's a really good question to think not just about the port, but how the port fits into the overall economy in Pierce County. So I think we're very fortunate in Pierce County to have two economic engines, one of them being the Port of Tacoma and the other one being JBLM. I don't think people understand the economic impact that the military base also has in our region. And we're very fortunate. I mean, take those two away, and it really does impact the South Sound region. But as far as leveraging economic development work, as we bring the jobs in to the South Sound, think about, well, number one, we have to leverage, so transportation is we're putting in the infrastructure that benefits other economic development work that we're doing. You know, and I think specifically like on South Hill out to Frederickson, which is also part of the Port of Tacoma, that's critical as well. So we want to make sure that we have access out that way so we can leverage our public transit systems and things like that. Other things that we work on, health services. So our hospitals and our healthcare that we have here is great. I mean, I thought it was a little bit shocking to learn that we have the highest retired military population here in Washington State because of not just our quality of life here, but because of our healthcare services and, you know, that kind of thing. And because I just grew up here, so of course you live here when you get older. So it was interesting to think people can come from all over the world to do that, and they do think about that in the South Sound region. But because of those two economic resources that we have here, what that does is create an environment for other businesses, whether you're a sign shop or a restaurant or anything like that. they see the opportunity for people who have those family wage jobs to earn a living and support and create an ecosystem around those two economic resources. So it's a great question. I love it.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about transportation. How do you see public transportation and freight mobility partnering to reduce congestion, increase transit ridership, and get goods to the market faster?
We have to open the freight corridors. Okay, the transportation package, and of course we just passed another piece of legislation to up the schedule for completion, which is good. But we have to address with the growing population, I'm not even going to do numbers, because it's, I mean, we have probably, and I'm being very conservative here, 1,000 new cars a year coming online in our particular East County area, not including what's happening in Tacoma. And as we keep providing and building housing that's affordable, we have to think about parking and, you know, how many more cars does that put on the road. So we want to look at how do we recruit businesses or jobs to Pierce County and get people off the road. They don't have to drive up to North King County, go up there for a lot of those jobs. We want to recruit those jobs into Pierce County, and that would help with some of the traffic congestion. But the other part, I don't know about your family, but mine is, you know, bipolar as far as access. So I have one child, I'm going to remain nameless here. I have one child, you know, they have 2 or 3 cars and they drive, you know, those cars every day. Some of it is their job, it's required. My other child is all about finding the transportation system to get him where he wants to go. And so I think more and more as our generations grow and they're tired of being in traffic, hopefully there will be a change on mentality. Do we have to drive everywhere, or can we use public transportation? The more that we can utilize the transportation systems that the public is funding right now, the more open our freight corridors will be, the better supported our port-related jobs will be. Have to maintain those freight corridors. I can't say that enough. And so I'm hoping that we're going to grow up into a better use of our public transportation systems. And the people that I interact with, probably you too, that's their goal as well. And they're out in the community asking questions all the time. It's just hard to get people to say, I'm going to switch to a bus, you know, to get to work, or how do I get that last mile? So there's some work to be done. But I do think the more that we can use public transportation and get cars off the road, it's not fun to sit in traffic for 2 hours one way anyway. So hopefully we can do that.
So here's another question that's not on the list.
Fabulous.
Speaking of transportation, Sound Transit 3 is, there's the Tacoma Dome link extension that will be coming through Fife. And it will be I think the Port of Tacoma has been involved with the planning of this also. It's another huge public transportation project. What are your thoughts on Sound Transit 3 and this project? The voters have approved it, so it's coming whether we like it or not. But how do you feel about that?
So ST3, boy, you really are going out there. So ST3, I think, again, it was another translation problem. I think there are a lot of people out in East Pierce that are frustrated about the cost of ST3 because they don't see that they're getting the benefit of it out in our particular area. Mm-hmm. However, when I talk to a lot of traffic engineers and things like that, we know that we need to build out a system. We know that we need that access. I think for me, as we look at the population growth that is coming, I mean, literally, it's like drinking water out of a fire hose, what's coming our way. And I don't think we can build enough roads to build our way out of this. So there's going to have to be a different way to get to our jobs. We need to bring the jobs closer to us so that I love people that say, I took a huge, and I probably hear this once a week. I don't know about you. I took a cut in pay, and I don't even care. I'm only on the road for 10 or 15 minutes, okay? So like quality of life, especially if you're raising kids, it becomes an issue. So ST3, do I think it is uber expensive? Do I think people really understood? I think the commercials and everything that you saw out there for marketing was, hey, this is going to be great. Everybody's going to have access. I don't think anybody really understood what that meant to their pocketbook. And so I think they're frustrated and a little bit crabby over it. But I do think down the road, we'll be glad that we have the infrastructure and a backbone, the initial piece of it, for our region that we can build off of. Wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to be on I-5 to go to Olympia? We get to our capital on a train. Yeah, that'd be great too. So that's my dream. But
yeah, one of these days. I mean, it's probably not something that we'll see in our lifetime,
right.
but
exactly.
You know, it's that infrastructure that you have to do for the future. So. Thank you for.
Well, and I think there's different modes. I think we have to be innovative, thinking about modes of transportation. I worked on doing a grant for an autonomous electric tram for the city of Sumner to take a look at that, and that's not the only one. An autonomous electric tram that does not run on rail. So their biggest expense for putting rail in or putting in a tram is the rail. So. People are thinking outside the box right now, and if those could be privately funded instead of publicly, so the taxes don't go. So there's some different things that I'm seeing where people, that's the innovation piece. And don't get me started on fiber and broadband, right? Because we need that out there as well, as much as other things. But I do think that there are some transportation professionals that are out there thinking outside the box, including the state.
Yeah.
State's got an innovation department in transportation. Who knew? And so I get all excited thinking about there might be a different option.
Yeah, we have to think about these things.
Yep.
Technology is changing very quickly, so we got to keep up with it. Okay, so your opponents, you've got a couple different opponents.
Yes.
If there was a question that you could ask either of them, what would that question be, and how would you answer that same question?
I think probably for me, I'm back to jobs again, family wage jobs. What would they do to help with workforce development? How would they grow family wage jobs here in the region? It's an easy statement to make. It's sort of a complex answer to give. It's not any one thing. And so for answering that question, again, being in the chamber environment and you're working with employers who are creating those jobs and they're telling you what the issues are. And the other part of it is, like, I don't know if you're seeing it now, but what I saw at the end of my position there at the Puyallup-Sumner Chamber was the difference in employers and how they value their employees. Employee turnover is very expensive. So they talked about culture, employee culture, and how do we better value our employees? How do we provide a living or a family wage? How do we provide benefits, daycare, access? How do we get them to work so they're not spending 2 hours one way to get to their job? All of those kinds of things I see them working towards with their employees. And I listen to labor as I'm talking to the longshoremen or the firefighters or Teamsters. They're all talking about how do we support the jobs and prepare for the future. Because right now there are jobs that 10 years ago didn't even exist. And so as you look at workforce development, I think that's something you create a coalition or an alliance for. You're working with K-12 to get kids or students interested in, like, I think the trades earlier. We need to be thinking about that in junior high. We need to be working with our colleges and our universities, our skill centers after that, and thinking about what kinds of jobs will there be in the future and how do we prepare our youth for that. And then I like the idea of apprenticeships a whole lot for the trades. People are clamoring. I heard that from my businesses. They're clamoring for electricians and plumbers and carpenters, skilled carpenters, not someone who can just swing a hammer, but someone who knows what he's doing when they're doing that. So I see those apprenticeships. My husband went through that, and we made a pretty good living at that. So I'm very supportive of it, and I think that it isn't just we need to create the jobs. There are avenues and people and organizations that you bring together in order to create those and support the jobs. If you bring an employer here and say, we have your workforce, and they're really not here, the skilled workforce isn't here when they get here, and maybe they don't have housing for their employees when they get here, it's a bigger recipe than what you think. And so if it's not here and we can't support those employers and the jobs that they bring, they move those companies and corporations elsewhere where they can provide the skilled workforce. So that's what I see.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Shelly. It's been a pleasure having you here today. And I want to remind everyone that primary voting day is August 6th. and you'll be getting your ballots in the mail in probably a couple of weeks. I don't think that they've been sent out yet, but be watching for those. And tune in tomorrow as we will be interviewing another Port Commissioner candidate, Deanna Keller, who's running for the other position. So, and we will be interviewing her at 10 tomorrow morning, I believe. So stay tuned. And I see Deb Main is watching, so thanks for watching, Deb. And hope that anyone who watches this, please share with all of your friends. The more we get this watched, the more we get all this information out there and people can learn about the candidates. I think it's so important that we get engaged in this process and get to know each of the candidates so that we can make an informed decision on voting day. So again, thank you, and have a wonderful day.